So the next uh, talk is on gaming like the Hollywood of tomorrow. And the speaker is Christopher Scatz. And introduced him as a founder of a game company called Soma Games in 2005. And it has grown as a company, and he has many door opens in the arts and entertainment industry, a very innovative pioneer arena for the Church of Christ. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Chris to present.
So I want to introduce you guys to an idea through an anecdotal tale. What we said here is that we think that video games is likely to be, or already is becoming, the Hollywood of tomorrow. But let me talk with an old story from the Hollywood of yesterday. And so there's this story that says, like, back in the early part of the 20th century, when Hollywood was just starting to blow up and movies are really going everywhere, there was this president of a movie studio who wrote back to a Bible college. We need writers, like, things are blowing up. We need people who really have character, the Bible, who can make us write scripts because we can't write them fast enough. And so he writes this letter to the dean of a big Bible college out east, who responds to him, "I would rather that my students go directly to hell than they stop in Hollywood along the way." Now, it's probably an anecdotal tale. It's probably not entirely true, but I think we all know that it sort of rings true as a sort of spirit that we saw going on in a lot of arts and entertainment. And to be clear, it wasn't just at the beginning of the century. Christians really pulled out of the MPAA around the 50s. And I think it's fair to say that we are constantly seeing conversations going on in the church about how Hollywood is not generating the kind of content that we had hoped they would, and yet it is only sort of we're getting reap what we can sow. So let me think about, like, what can we learn from this story? Well, I think that one thing that we can learn is that Hollywood became a gigantic cultural medium, something that was a machine that generated cultural artifacts for the following 100 years, and it will continue to do so. I will mention this as, like, entertainment is actually America's second largest export beyond agriculture. It is the thing that we are known for throughout the whole world, but still largely the church has abandoned it for a long time, and then we chose to judge it, and we pulled back. Now these days there's a lot of ministries and opportunities who are trying to reframe that, who are trying to get back into Hollywood, but the truth is that we are playing catch up at best. Now let me be clear about something. I am not the guy who says that everything out of Hollywood is evil. I don't think it's OTD. I don't think that all that we have here that comes out of Southern California is a wicked thing. But I think it's fair to say that some of it is. And I think it's fair to say that the church's influence in Hollywood is something that could be a lot different if we played our cards a little bit differently. I compare this to video gaming, and I would argue that right now, video gaming looks a lot like it did in 1910. There's an explosion of content. There's an explosion of players. We are moving from where we're just learning how to make these things to how do we make stories? How do we turn it into art? I'd point out that Roger Ebert once said that a video game can't be art until it makes him cry. Well, if anyone, you've had a chance to see Ryan Green's game, That Dragon Cancer, and there's other games like this, these things will make you cry and sob and ugly cry. Like, we have reached that moment in which gaming can definitely have that kind of physical impact on our hearts, that emotional impact. Like, gaming is at that spot. It is no longer a craft. It is becoming an art. And I would say it is also now becoming a place where kids who are coming up on Gen Z and younger, they no longer really refer to, like, the cultural moments from a movie or for a book, like, oh, remember what Robinson Crusoe did. They're saying things like, remember what Master Chief did, remember what Link did, remember these stories. These become their cultural touch points. And yet, even more so than we did with Hollywood, is that the churches largely pulled themselves out. Now, what if we could do something different? If video gaming is the next Hollywood, as I'm proposing, what would we do differently? What if you could go back there? What if you could change the rules? What if you could say something to those people who are making those decisions at the time, and you could really make the decisions from the church as a global outfit, like how they could impact this culture making machine? What would we do differently? I want to say that this time will be different. Now, just to be clear, like, who we are, Soma Games was founded in 2005, but we are not a Christian game company. We're not making David and Goliath games. We're not doing that kind of thing. Nothing against that. That's just not what we felt called to. We wanted to make mainstream video games in which our Christianity was very much in there, but it was latent, the way that C.S. Lewis talked about. That it was something that shows up in our worldview, it shows up in our mechanics, it shows up in the ways that we write stories. And so we started to say that we become the C.S. Lewis of video games, which I think is a lot of fun, but of course it's big shoes to fill. What Lewis did, I think really well, is he had both worlds available to him. Yes, he had his apologetics, he had his Mere Christianity, he had those things on the radio and in print, but he was also known for purely mainstream fiction. And so you think about Narnia or the Space Trilogy, he was able to live in both worlds. And what he said about the Space Trilogy specifically is he wanted it to be something that someone who would never ever go to church could read these books, but still be drawn to think about deep and eternal things. And that's what we hope to do with video games. Now, for anybody who doesn't know about games, I'll just really quick go over it. It is a gigantic, gigantic space. And if you don't know how big, it might surprise you. For one thing, it's not a bunch of teen boys. It's roughly 50-50, male and female. In fact, there are more 30-something women who play games than there are teen boys. It is also an enormous and rapidly growing market. This year is over $150 billion. I should say 2019 was 150 billion, and that it is split largely across content, hardware, and merchandise. Just to put that in perspective, this is bigger than all of the games, or I'm sorry, all of the box office, all of the music combined ×2. So that's how big the gaming market is, and it consistently returns yields over 10% year over year. And where the pandemic, as just a kind of a timely note, where the pandemic has really hit every other entertainment industry really hard, gaming has had a big boost. In fact, you have the World Health Organization saying, while you're in quarantine, you should play video games. So it's a huge goal for gaming, and that's not likely to stop. For one thing, is that the entire production and consumption pipeline for gaming can all be remote, can all be virtual. No one needs to go to a film studio, no one needs to go to a set. So gaming is actually really, really well poised for the current situation. But who cares, right? So blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of slide I give to investors. But what I want to say to this group is something that says that the point isn't the money. Money equals eyeballs. Money means that there's nearly 3 billion gamers worldwide. And that's everything from little old ladies who are playing Candy Crush to little tiny babies who are playing, car games in the back of mom's SUV. And all of these people are looking for something. They're all looking for cues about what it is to be human, what it means to be an American, to be in Puerto Rico, to be in China, whatever else. All the time when we look to arts and entertainment, we are looking for answers. We are looking for the deep pieces. And so all of these gamers are looking for something in the way that they distract themselves. My question is, what are they going to find? Are they going to find good messages? Or are they going to find good sort of like Christ-driven mechanics and messages? Or are they going to find something else? Oops, I did my slides in the wrong order. So if we go through this, what we're really looking for is this is a matter of influence. Gaming is already becoming the most influential market that we have in this world. So from there, I'm going to speak briefly about arts and entertainment. I think that there's a story where we were recently at this was actually an investor opportunity, and we had a woman, this was a church-driven opportunity. So these are all believers who come in here, and a woman walked up to us, our booth, and at this point we hadn't really set everything up, so we just had some art, some pictures, and she's telling us stories. Oh, there's mice, there's swords, there's stuff going on, that sounds kind of fun. And then she finally heard the word video game, and she literally crossed herself and walked away and wouldn't have anything to do with us. She thought that we were somehow like subtly demonic, and she just ran away from us. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but there's always been a segment of the church that has rejected arts and entertainment because we see it as frivolous. We see it sort of like violates the idle hands make the devil's work, this kind of thing. And so there's always been a picture, especially in the Protestant side, in which arts and entertainment has been either rejected entirely or certainly like downplayed. But I think we have to change that, because art is the language of the heart. Let me give you an example. Like, have you ever really wanted to just press two mandibles together to exchange bodily fluids? No, nobody wants that. But that's not what a kiss is. A kiss is something that is powerful. A kiss is something that is brilliant. A kiss is something that changes the world, because we don't live in facts. We live in story. So when Blaise Pascal says that the heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing, that's what he means. Every salesman will tell you that every car is bought on an emotional decision, and it's only later that we sort of backfill with the facts and that rationalization. And like it or not, gaming will be the dominant cultural medium for the next 100 years. So what I'm really talking about here is what I call the future of storytelling. This is where all of our moral tales, all of our indications of what it means to be human, these are what they're coming through these segments, and it's going to come through gaming. So we have to embrace this. Going back to influence, let me tell you where Soma Games is. Soma Games is a small little company. We're up here in Newburgh, Oregon, and yet God has constantly opened doors for us that we really have no business having. Things land in our laps, doors open for us. I'll give you an example. I was in a line getting a CD signed to a country star, and so she's got a record album and she's on tour and everything else. But when I get up to her and we start chatting, she finds out I make gaming, and she literally stops what she's doing from signing autographs from hundreds of fans, and she says, "You make video games? You're living the dream." And she suddenly like recognized, like, apparently gaming is this thing. It's sexy, it's hot, it's entertaining, it's exciting. And so that has led us into all kinds of opportunities to speak into this place. We also get invited to schools and universities. People want to know what's going on. They want either career advice. They want to know stories about sort of what's the philosophy of gaming. We've done this dozens and dozens of times in rooms of hundreds and hundreds of kids. We usually tell them you don't have to go to college, but that's for another story. Just 6 months ago, we were in Washington, and we were invited to speak to a bunch of intelligence and policy people at the State Department about how gaming can be used, for example, to spread ideas around the world for things like human rights in Saudi Arabia, or for pro-democracy things in Russia. Things like this, where gaming becomes a platform to be like giant idea viruses, and it's wonderful. This idea of influence has become so central to our story that we just recently launched what we call Soma Soulworks. And this is where we're taking the influence that seems to be falling to us, and we started doing a discipleship program. We're especially looking for 20, 30 something men and women who are these sort of warrior poets. These are the people who are sort of post-college, pre-family, who are really trying to figure out what is it like to be an adult. That's where this has gone. And this is what we say, where we fit into this space. This is passion as a platform. I got into this not because I thought it was a great idea. In fact, I thought it was a dumb idea, but it was something that God kind of forced me into. And if you ever want to read our story on the website, you can learn all about it. But it has proven to be a very powerful thing. Now, if you remember this guy who like showed people they should go to hell instead of going to Hollywood, what would we do different? I think what's critical is it's not good enough to make a Christian game. It's not nearly enough even to have a Christian game company. What we really need is we need to be apostolic. We need to be reaching into how can people be teaching the culture of the kingdom of heaven, and bringing that not just to the product of the Hollywood of tomorrow, but also about the process of the Hollywood of tomorrow. This is a 50-year project. This isn't about my little company. This isn't about my little game about mice. This is the kind of thing that's going to take billions of dollars over decades and thousands of people in every walk of life. So as I wrap this up, I just want to invite you. We want to see the kingdom of God reflected in the whole arts and entertainment sector, the next sector. We want the product, we want the process, but we really hope that people like you can help us build the Hollywood of tomorrow. And I think that's the end.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. A new way to think about church, because it is definitely the Father's heart that the church penetrate all corners of the world, all culture. And this is such an important arena.
Amen. I totally agreed. And Chris, I know I've reached out to you about this. I'm a big Redwall fan, a big Brian Jock fan. So I clearly see the motifs, the themes, the story, the visuals that you're putting together, and it gives me a lot of personal joy. I think there's other out there. But we have some questions from the audience. One question that we have is about what you would suggest for people who are not building games but want to impact the church, maybe with games in mind, like a place to start.
So are you talking about technologists, or are you talking about influencers? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, exactly. Technologists who agree with games and what you're saying about them, but they don't personally build video games.
Yeah, I think for one thing is that gaming as a sector is really interesting, and it's this collaboration between let me put it this way. Lots of people have said that a movie is an artistic project that has a big technological back end. Gaming is sort of the opposite. We have a big technological back end that's sort of supported by an artistic piece. And so the technology, and this comes from everything from how do we stream, how do we manage polygons. There's a tremendous amount of really powerful technology. And I would say one of the things that will make the difference in the coming years is whether or not technologists can create the systems and the code and the hardware that will drive this and become differentiators. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for apps, for net code, for graphics rendering. Like there's a thousand sectors where a person who can enter that space and really be disruptive will put themselves up to be in another place of influence really easily.
That's great. Thank you. And specifically with regards to Hollywood and how the church hasn't shown up and now we're not showing up in games. You mentioned that Dragon Cancer and the work of great people to tell stories. How can somebody get involved in things like that if they do have a technology background and they're already, let's say, making video games? Are there development communities for Christian gamers? Are there opportunities to really dig in here that you've personally seen?
Yeah, for one thing is that the indie game space is very wide open, and the barrier to entry for indie gaming is very low. And so comparatively, like a sort of an indie movie might be $1 or $2 million, but an indie video game might be 10 grand. And that's if you're paying people, which often they're not. So the barrier to entry is remarkably low, and the appetite for indie games is really high. So things like Steam and the App Store for Apple, these things really allow anybody who has any kind of technology, any kind of idea, to get in there really inexpensively and kind of build a brand or build a tribe from there.
Okay, I've got a little bit of an interesting question here. So I really appreciate this question specifically because it's addressing something a little bit adjacent to your topic. And it's that one of our viewers was in the Seattle area visiting her son who just finished Restart, a digital addiction recovery program. So their population struggles with gaming addiction, getting into major debt. It hijacks their education, their relationships, and a lot of things in their lives. So I know that every good opportunity also has a shadow side to it. Do you
Sure.
want to speak on anything that would help clarify the boundaries in video games or the pitfalls that are available if we don't act to change the
Yeah,
narrative?
you bet. So two pieces. One is I think that this is a place where there's a real opportunity for the church to speak constructively and proactively to a whole range of topics that involve video game. Video game addiction is certainly one of them, but so is misogyny, so is over violence. So there's lots of there's the work culture of crunch. There's lots of things that are contained in the video game space where I think the church could say something really meaningful. And so that might be about the value of rest. That might just be about avoiding exploitation of other human beings. I think in the case of addiction, we'd be really smart to treat video games in some ways the way that we treat controlled substances like alcohol. Like there's an awareness, I think, that alcohol is an example that I suppose, like theological differences notwithstanding, like alcohol is a thing that has risks. And so even the best sort of like experience with alcohol, there's the ability, like we have to do it with wisdom, we have to do it with limits. There has to be a sense in which we put boundaries on this. And I think that by and large, all of America, much less the church is no different. They don't think of video games in that way. They think of it as just sort of I don't know, like pop or something. And so like, well, how bad can it be? But there's plenty of data to say that's not the right way to look at it. But if the church were to take a thought about this and say, like, how can we create meaningful boundaries that treat this as a controlled substance, that would at least be a piece down the right conversation.
Yeah, the audience agrees with you and really appreciates what you're saying. We're getting a lot of different feedback right now. I'm just going to choose one. Somebody is asking about the tool of video games for helping folks overcome PTSD,
Oh, good.
for overcoming like things that they're struggling with, and
Yeah.
as an antidote to a lot of common ills. Do you see that in the future of gaming? And are there people working on things that will help actually change our minds for the better in more than just like entertainment?
Oh yeah, and so this isn't the future. This is the present. So gaming as a both as it's been used in EMDR circumstances. It's been used with PTSD. One of the things that gaming does really uniquely is the ability to inexpensively recreate a situation virtually, right? So whether that's in VR or just on your screen, that allows, for example, soldiers come home from war, and the ability to sort of use EMDR techniques and visualization to help process really difficult memories. It's a powerful tool. And when you add virtual reality to that, it becomes even more immersive. Now, you got to be careful with that. I'm no I'm no psychologist, and so I don't want to speak too much to it, but I know that that is being very, it's used a lot. It's also used for learning disabilities, to help people learn in different environments, to help modify how people are dealing with all kinds of anxiety disorders. The ability for a game to be super responsive, that is the key, I think, to what makes gaming kind of on this fringe between technology and entertainment. But its ability to be responsive and interact with the person's agency, their choices, their situation is unique in all the world, at least right now. And I think that the therapeutic aspects are only just starting to be explored, but they're super powerful and exciting.
Yeah, that's really good to know. Yeah, it does give us some hope for the fact that video games and the medium of technology that's here really has a plethora of use cases that we haven't fully wrapped our minds around, haven't fully captured like exactly what's there.
Yeah.
I think people are wondering, there's a ton of questions. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get to all of them, but this is great because I know there's more people that want to engage with you. Do you think that because of VR and what's happening in our neural pathways, that people can get hijacked, kind of like snow crash, where if you flash enough things to the brainstem through VR really quickly, people through subliminal messaging and games are going to be able to hack the mind in a certain way? Does that seem like something we should watch out for because knowing how visual we are as creatures?
So let me do two things. Yes, I think that's possible. In fact, I know that you're the same idea of like how can we use subliminal messages is used in a lot of the mindfulness VR apps. And so in this case, they're letting you know, right? And so it's sort of upfront and with consent. You know, we're gonna be zapping your brain with positive messages, but certainly that could be hijacked. So the technology is real. However, I would also caution against fear. Because I think that's the kind of thing that also happens with the Hollywood example. Is there is always the counter technology that says like, okay, I want to protect myself from that kind of stuff, and so the ability to break strong encryption, or in some cases to have strong encryption, the ability to filter my internet. These technologies always come up in tandem because it's always an arms race, and so no doubt that ability to hack people maliciously will be there, but so will also the tools that protect us from that. I think that's a gimme that we should just expect.
Got it. Thank you so much. This is a great start to the conversation.
This is fascinating, Chris. This is so amazing. You're the pioneer doing the apostolic explore.
Thanks.
And yes, I really believe that. I believe that God's kingdom should have more influence in the culture than being passive. I really do.
Much obliged.
So thank you.